everyone for coming out tonight. Welcome, bienvenidos. My name is Anali Vargas, and I'm the project manager for the San Luis Valley Ecosystem Council. I'm a sixth-generation Valley native, born and raised in Manassas, Colorado. Thank you again all for being here tonight. Happy to see familiar faces, and actually I see a lot of new faces, so thank you for being here. For those that are new, just a quick recap. This is the fourth meeting in Pinellas County in regards to potential national conservation area. And I say, again, potential, because nothing has been proposed. This is still, we're having conversations with community members in Pinellas County and other respective communities to talk about permanent protection of our public lands. So again, this is still community discussion. So at each meeting, so for those that are new, at each meeting, community members have brought up concerns, questions, and we've been forming a panel at each meeting to answer these questions. So we've had, okay, I knew I was gonna do a faux pas, so this is my faux pas for the evening, apologies. Sorry, I need to keep time, but I don't need text right now. So, like previous panels, we've had ranchers, permittees, our New Mexico BLM, all talk about permits on public lands, different designations, whether anything happens to those permittees. So that was the first panel that we had. That was in Manassas. The second one we did have of experts, recreation experts, San Cristo National Heritage Area, our SLV BLM, educating us on current designations along the Rio Grande corridor, some of the projects that are being done, and of course, recreation on our current public lands and answering questions that community members had about recreation. So one of the questions, or a lot of the questions that have been brought up quite a bit, of course, our water. So this is the San Luis Valley, and one of the things that's been brought up is, well, what about our water? And federally reserved water rights have been one of the questions. High water mark, the natural area, the Rio Grande Compact, etc. Whether any type of designation would affect water or water rights. So that's why we put this panel together of water experts to answer all these questions for you tonight. So when we do talk about water, Dave, I remember I was in the 2016 water class, and that was quite a while ago. And one of the things that Dave taught about, I remember, was water law, which, I mean, went over my head, of course. But he stood up there and he says, if you remember anything, just one thing about this water leaders course, it's the water in the San Luis Valley is over-appropriated. Dave, I remembered. You'd be proud of me. Yeah. That's the one thing I remember him saying. If you get anything out of this class, just remember that. So I did. So each of you, when you came in, you signed in and received a packet. So just let me go over these packets before I introduce our panel. You did get the agenda. So we are dedicating the full night to our panel and questions about water. Our ground rules, and then our bios that I will read of our panelists. And then we have our summary, and then the white paper. So what this white paper is, so let me explain a little bit. So we have a working group or stakeholder group of volunteers that have been volunteering their time to put together this, what we call a white paper. And it's a document that's been, oh, there went our map. Mark, Chris, can somebody? I didn't know if they would stick to these walls. I brought like 10 different types of tape. And anyway. So the white paper it's a living document. This is not the final draft. It's just the one that we have so far. We're building onto it, and it's for educational purposes to talk about, the legislative side, the water side. We talk about, the community side, and again, it's just for educational purposes. So you can go through. And so, for example, we are fortunate to have precious natural resources on federal lands. So the stakeholder group worked on this packet for, again, educational purposes to give to you guys to see what's being talked about as far as permanent protection. Again, potential. And then the last is we did include a map because everybody's been asking, are there boundaries? And we don't have specific boundaries because, again, this is a potential. It's not a proposal. So what we did is we included the project map. What this includes is the designations that are currently out there along the Rio Grande corridor. So you can see it starts off at the Puncha and goes to the Alamosa Wildlife Refuge, which is the same 33-mile stretch as the natural area. But again, it shows where the San Luis Hills are, which is the WSA, where the ACEC is, where Sigo is, where the Rio Grande is. And so, again, this is just the map that shows the designations, not boundaries yet, but it could be. It could be if there is a proposal for an NCA. So that's why we included it, because everybody's been asking. And we do have maps on the walls and maps on the floor as well. So afterwards, you're welcome to take a look at them if they're still up. If not, I can hold them up. But yeah, we couldn't put pins in the walls. So funny story, I brought 10 different types of tape, and they're still not working. But anyway, okay, without further ado, let's get started. So out of respect for everybody's time. So the first panelist that I'm going to introduce is Attorney David Robbins from Partner & Hill & Robbins, PC. So Attorney David Robbins is president and co-founder of Hill & Robbins, PC, where his practice emphasizes the fields of water and natural resources law, water quality, and environmental law. Prior to entering private practice, Mr. Robbins served in the U.S. Army, captain from 1969 to 1972. Thank you for your service, sir. And with the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, Region 8, 1973 to 1974. He then joined the Colorado Attorney General's office as the first Assistant Attorney General and head of the Natural Resources Section, and was later appointed the Deputy Attorney General. Mr. Robbins represented the state of Colorado in a variety of interstate water matters and served as counsel to the state engineer and adjudication, sorry, that's a hard word for me, proceedings and trials concerning basin-wide rules and regulations. He also represented the Colorado Water Conservation Board and successfully defended the constitutionality of the state's first in-stream flow protection law. Híjole. Since 1981, Mr. Robbins, sorry, my apologies. Since 1981, Mr. Robbins has served as general counsel to the Rio Grande Water Conservation District, where he has led the efforts to defeat speculate proposals to mine the groundwater of Colorado's San Luis Valley. So, for example, AWDI versus City of Alamosa, which ultimately resulted in congressional action on a bill Mr. Robbins initially drafted to create the Great Sand Dunes National Park and Preserve. From 1985 to 2011, Mr. Robbins has served as counsel of record for the state of Colorado in the U.S. Supreme Court, case of Kansas versus Colorado, number 105 original, involving the Arkansas River Compact. Both before the special master in the court, Mr. Robbins has served as general counsel to the Republican River Water Conservation District since its creation in 2004, and served as special counsel to the Southwestern Water Conservation District for over 20 years. Thank you, Mr. Robbins. And he was actually at a conservation district meeting today, so it's been a long day for you. Okay, Mr. Nathan Combs. So Nathan Combs, Conejas Water Conservancy District Manager, and I found just a small bio on you. He does a lot, so I was really surprised. So Mr. Nathan Combs is the Rio Grande Basin representative to the Colorado Water Conservation Board. He's a fourth-generation farmer from the San Luis Valley, has strived to support the livelihoods of agricultural water users in the upper Rio Grande Basin. He has been a member of the Rio Grande Basin Roundtable since 2010 and resides in Manassa, Colorado. He's my vecino. In recent years, Combs has partnered with biologists at Trout Unlimited to improve habitat for fish in the region's rivers and streams. Nathan is the manager of the Conejas Water Conservancy District and holds a BA in business from Adams State University. He enjoys four-wheeling, snowmobiles, and motorcycles with his family. Yeah, welcome, Nathan. Thank you. Mr. Craig Cotton on the end over here. Oh, no, we can't. He wants us to skip over him. I say no. So Craig Cotton is the Division of Water Resources Division Engineer. Craig is the Division Engineer for Water Division number 3 of the Colorado Division of Water Resources, where he manages surface and groundwater use in the Rio Grande Basin in Colorado. He is also Colorado's engineer, advisor to the Rio Grande and Castilla Creek compacts, and has been extensively involved or in the current U.S. Supreme Court case on the Rio Grande Compact. Craig has testified as an expert witness in many Division III water case trials, and hearings, including in the Division III Groundwater Rules and Regulations case. Craig graduated from Colorado State University with a degree in civil engineering and has worked for the Division of Water Resources for 33 years. He and his wife, Cindy, live near Monte Vista. Welcome, Craig. And Pat, again, just this little blurb. Pat McDermott, Division of Water Resources staff engineer. Pat McDermott has served as a staff engineer in the Division III office of the Division of Water Resources since 1993, residing somewhere in a cluttered office. Really? As our treasures of 30 years of research into the surface and groundwater rights and users of the San Luis Valley. Pat is married to me. They have 2 children who are learning to hit Dad's wiffle curve. Got it. And he's a 1985 graduate from Metro State in mechanical engineering. Welcome, Pat. All right. So, sorry, allergies. Okay, so our first question is for Mr. Attorney David Robbins. Could you give us some background on the Rio Grande Natural Area legislation and the importance of the water language within that legislation? How does this relate to protecting Colorado from enacting federal reserved water rights?
Thank you, Anna. Good evening, everyone. It's nice to see many of you again. There are quite a few familiar faces from many of my adventures throughout the valley and here in the Canals. I started working on the problems of water supply in the San Luis Valley in 1975, so almost 50 years ago. The first 4 years I represented the state engineer, and after that I remained as a special assistant attorney general and then became counsel to the Rio Grande Water Conservation District. I want to take just a minute, if I may, to sort of go through the thinking that has gone on for most of these 50 years. And before I go to that, please understand, I am not here as a proponent or an opponent of any particular change in land classification that you want to discuss. That's not my role. My role is to make sure you are absolutely clear why things were done and why the status of the Rio Grande is so critical to every single community and irrigator in the San Luis Valley. That's my only role here. All right. If you go and begin to think about how the Rio Grande Water Conservation District on all of your behalves has dealt with the federal government over the last 40 or 50 years, it becomes pretty surprising. For example, this is the only national forest in the United States that has the full in-stream flow rights that the forest sought decreed by the Colorado Water Court. Why did we do that? Well, if we walk out the front door and turn around and look at the mountains all around the valley, that's where those in-stream flows are. And where are they headed? Right down here to your head gates. So this was one place where the Forest Service and the water user community had common interests. The water user community didn't want anybody to be able to put in a diversion structure in the forest to take water out of the valley. That's basically the first thing. What next? Well, we agreed with the National Park Service that Sand and Mackinac Creeks should have in-stream flow rights on them because the basis of the Great Sand Dunes National Monument was specifically in part to protect the flow of those streams. We have shortly after AWDI was completed and the court had ruled against them, I began to look at all of the land withdrawals that we could ask Congress to make in the valley in order to be able to have the federal government gain an additional interest in protecting the water resources of the San Luis Valley. Forest Service, water users on the same side. Park Service, water users on the same side. Now we've got the Rio Grande below Alamosa that we have a question about, and I drafted a piece of legislation that wasn't taken up right of way, but to create a natural area. Why did I choose a natural area? Because there are no implied or appropriated reserve water rights associated with a natural area. It was done thoughtfully and intentionally. Did we look at national conservation areas? Yes. National recreation areas? Yes. Wild and scenic rivers? Yes. National historic rivers? Yes. We went through the whole list and took out anywhere it would result in the Federal Management Agency, the BLM, having an obligation to protect and enhance and improve the flow in the Rio Grande, at least in the minds of the management agency, through from Alamosa to the state line. Why didn't we want that? Because all of the water use in the San Luis Valley is above that point. And should the federal government be put in the position of holding water rights, they would have to appear in water court, cost you all a bunch of time and money, trying to figure out whether or not something you wanted to do, something Nathan wanted to do on the Conejos, would or would not have an adverse impact on it. So the whole point of the natural area legislation was to provide a federal protection for the federal land within the corridor, to provide a way to encourage the private landowners. Remember, close to 50% of the land in this corridor are private land, are owned by private individuals. How to pull that all together to protect the corridor without imposing or implying a federal water right. Okay, so this is what this natural area thing really does. It says, it is established to conserve, restore, and protect the natural, historic, cultural, scientific, scenic, wildlife, and recreation resources within the area. And so that is the BLM's role under this legislation. It provides that there is to be created a plan. The purpose of the plan, and it's created by a commission with local representation, which has occurred, and the plan was to sort of bring the county land use planning activities together with what the BLM planning activities were so we could actually generate some protections in the corridor. Now, the things that I want to be clear that the water users, the people that I represented, got out of this. Nothing in this act amends, modifies, or is in conflict with the Rio Grande Compact. Nothing authorizes the regulation of private land in the natural area. Nothing authorizes the imposition of a mandatory stream flow. Nothing creates an express or implied federal water right. And nothing imposes any water quality standard within or upstream of the natural area that is more restrictive. So, and then it also says nothing prevents the state of Colorado using the Colorado in-stream flow law from seeking and acquiring an in-stream flow on the Rio Grande. So the whole, I hope you see the whole point here was to provide protection for the river, to provide a mechanism to plan for its use and protection, and at the same time not place a federal agency in the position of having to be in conflict with all of the irrigated acreage in this valley and the cities and towns in this valley above it. That's the whole underlying premise. And it fits in exactly with the national park, the Forest Service water rights, it's all designed to isolate and protect the valley from efforts to impact the local community, to give the local community a say in what is being done on the river. And why is there no need for an in-stream flow on the river? Because Craig and Pat run the river, the Conejos and the Rio Grande, to constantly deliver water in service of the compact. And so there's no need for something to ensure that there are flows, because there are flows that have to be occurring there if they're doing their job under the compact. I will sit down. I get pretty wound up about this, everybody, after almost 50 years of trying to protect you all and make sure that your way of life is protected now and into the future. It winds me up. So I'll shut up.
Hello? Testing, 1, 2, 3. Okay, there we go. Mr. Combs, how important is the Conejos River to the Rio Grande Compact obligations, the 60-40 agreement?
Sorry about that. So the Conejos River is the most important, right? I mean, the Rio
Main
Grande's
tributary.
the largest tributary to the Conejos.
What's the biggest tributary to the Conejos River?
The Rio Grande. Yes. Can you turn that down? Whew. It's going to make me need hearing aids there. Okay, so the Conejos River system, it's just larger than a third of the size of the Rio Grande in general, right, on your long-term averages. But we pay just slightly over 40% of the total compact. And so as far as importance, we have a very significant role to play. The Conejos has its own obligation within Colorado's obligation on the Rio Grande Compact. Since I moved into this, I was raised out by Capulina and Carmel, moved over here when we bought my wife's family farm and learned about a compact because Alamosa didn't have it. And so when I started learning more about it, from the day I heard about the compact, all I ever heard was the Conejos got hosed on the compact because they sent the poorest lawyer, guy had to pack his own lunch, blah, blah, blah. BS, okay? So one of the best things that you can understand about water is if you'll take the time to extract your emotion and look at the facts and look at what can and should be done, better decisions are made. And so the Conejos system, even though it looks like we're paying this disproportionate amount, when the joint investigation was done, they did the exact same methodology on the Rio Grande and the Conejos, which was, they said, you take everything you can use, we'll take the rest. How does it get more fair than to say, take all you can use, we'll take the rest? If you think about the shape of the Conejos, it's in the shape of a horseshoe. It comes out of Platoro, comes down here past Antoniano, and then circles back up to Las Salsas. So all the water we diverted in that 10-year study period was going out of the river, flood irrigation, right? That was the only type going on. It irrigated, built the sub, and then returned to the river. And New Mexico, Colorado, and the Texas division then was based on you get everything you could use, we take what you couldn't take out of the river or returned to the river. The same methodology was applied to the Rio Grande, but there's a geologic structure called the closed basin. So all the water diverted north of the Rio Grande never returned. And so mathematically, if you compare it, it looks like the Rio Grande had an insatiable ability to take more water out because it never returned. So that's why when you look at the Rio Grande, it was the same methodology, just different geology, but the Conejos did not get screwed. Our problem is we still get all we can use. Our appetites have grown. So when you look at the 60-40 agreement, that has more to do with the closed basin than the compact, okay? So we pay about 40% of the compact on the long-term average, but the 60-40 agreement has to do with the closed basin. I don't know if we want to get into that. There's a whole lot of history there that'll upset everybody. So we don't have to go that deep. But if you would like to know the history of the closed basin, please come to my office, 318 Main Street. I can give you all the history, all the records, all the minutes. We can tell you who was the good guy, who was the bad guy, and it might surprise you. And we can go through, I mean, it swapped roles pretty quick. David can tell you that they were all good, they were all bad. And so that history on the 60-40 has more to do with the closed basin. It does not dictate how the compact is paid. But now getting back to the importance of the Keneos, the first 25 rights on the Keneos are technically older than any of the other rights in the basin, other than the People's Ditch over there in San Luis. And so it's one of the first established, the longest farming. It has the cultural, the heritage. It's got all of these basics to it. But the most important thing the Keneos has is the protections as long as we comply with our portion of the Rio Grande Compact. And so in relation to what we're talking about with the National Conservation Area potential for the Keneos, our number one priority for the Keneos Water Conservancy District is protecting our ability to manage the compact as a state, not have someone from the federal government or another state, have inputs to how we manage the rivers in Colorado. And so that's all I got.
Okay, so this one is for Pat. So could you briefly explain the balancing act that the state engineer's office has to perform in meeting Rio Grande Compact obligations and managing river flow? And could you briefly describe it from a seasonal perspective? And you need the, yeah, okay.
If you don't mind, Anna, I'm going to stand
No.
next to my beautiful diagrams that are too small for you in the back to see. And I just want to say amen to what Nathan says. He says it so eloquently about how the Keneos used as much water as they possibly could, and the rest of it spilled out. And a lot of that happened with the Rio Grande. So thank you. I agree with everything he said. I have some diagrams up here, but the Division of Water Resources, we're responsible for the water rights administration of the San Luis Valley. Craig is our division engineer. And we have an annual compact requirement. We are required to deliver water to New Mexico and Texas under the provisions of the compact. In 1938, they ratified that compact. We built a debt. Let's see if I have, yes, this one's kind of tough to see, but we ignored the provisions of the Rio Grande Compact until 1968 when we were sued. And we built nearly 1 million acre-foot debit that we brought back to about 550,000 acre-feet of debit. Now, the annual flow on the Rio Grande used to be about 650,000, but we dug a hole in our compact delivery to New Mexico and Texas of more than the annual flow of the Rio Grande. So you couldn't even shut off the Rio Grande in 1 year and fill that hole. But through diligent application of curtailment, we brought us out of debit to 550,000. And then in June of 1985, there was a spill at Elephant Butte Reservoir, and it erased that. And since that time, we've been right on the graph. Currently, Colorado has in a debit status of 1,100 acre feet. Okay, so we can go above and below our compact delivery requirements. Now, let me go back here. On an average annual basis, the Rio Grande produces, really, my number is 625. Craig, what do you want to use today? 640. He likes 640. Under a normal situation, the Rio Grande can consume all but about 27% of that water, okay? It's 27% of that 600,000 acre feet that we've got to send down south. Okay, for the Keneos, it's about 36% of a normal year. That's about 300,000 acre feet, okay? Last year we were above normal. We had almost 400,000 acre feet of delivery requirement. We missed by 1,000 acre feet. I want to make that point. We do not have a daily requirement to deliver water. And back in 2002, Lobatos got to 5 CFS, something like that? A little bit more? Oh, you must have measured that. Craig was our lead hydrographer for many years before he became division engineer. But the curve on the Keneos, there's no delivery requirement for the Keneos for the first 100,000 acre feet of index. Y'all can use all of that water, okay? But as you build up to a higher, whoops, here's the Keneos here. As you build to a higher amount, you get to a point pretty quickly on the graph where there's no more water left to utilize. It all has to go to New Mexico and Texas. The same thing happens on the Rio Grande. but you got to get up around 700 to 800,000 acre feet, where we don't efficiently use that water in our historical period, so now we've got to deliver it. This is the most important document for our water users in this basin, is the Rio Grande Compact. It allows us to secure the amount of water that we've historically used. And on a seasonal basis, Anna, I'd like to just say that we set an annual curtailment on our Two River system, but we take all the flow during the wintertime. So January through March, all that water is ushered through the system to the state line, so that reduces our bill. This is a lot like your income tax. You don't try to pay your whole bill in December. You can't pay it all in one day. So we responsibly take all the water January through March, and then when our irrigation season ends November 1st, we try to usher that water once again through and pay the rest of our compact requirement for that year. We try to set a curtailment at the beginning of the season. April 1st is our presumptive date of irrigation season start, and try to stay with that the rest of the season. So, good start. We could be here for hours to learn about the Rio Grande Compact.
Oh, I know. Thank you, Pat. Okay, next question is for, again, Mr. Robbins. How compatible are policy considerations when discussing long-term BLM land protection designations like an NCA with adjacent designations like the Rio Grande Natural Area?
Thank you, Anna. First of all, every time Congress withdraws land from the public domain for a specific purpose, that's referred to as a reservation. And as with all reservations, be they for Indian tribes or military reservations or national parks or national monuments, they, unless specifically denied by Congress, carry with it an implied reserved right of sufficient water to support the reservation. That is the reason that as we ask Congress to undertake additional land withdrawals, creation of new forms of land holding, we have to be very careful as a community to make sure that we are not inadvertently putting ourselves in a position of conflict with whatever the management agency will be. So there's nothing inconsistent between a national conservation area and the natural area as long as the Congress, when it considers legislation to create a national conservation area, specifically acknowledges the decision it has already made with regard to the Rio Grande from Alamosa to the state line. That's all that needs to happen. As far as I'm concerned, and I'm sure as far as most people who do this sort of stuff all the time, it doesn't require that one has to be extinguished, but it does require that Congress specifically acknowledge that the limitations and restrictions contained in the natural area legislation remain unchanged and unaltered. So in that way, then, we as a community, you all and me and everybody else in the valley, we remain protected from the assertion of a federal water right that could conflict with Craig and Pat's decisions about compact deliveries on both the Rio Grande and the Conejos, and so that we aren't in a position of being concerned that the federal government or the federal agency needs to come into water court to protect some interest that Congress has given it. It's really critical. We can't blame, for example, the BLM if they were told by Congress Congress said, we're creating a national conservation area and we want you to secure for the people, as of the date of this act, all of the water necessary to make the conservation area do X, Y, and Z. Well, we can't be mad at the BLM. Congress has ordered them to do something. It's our job, in my opinion, to make sure our congressional delegation understands that isn't helpful to the people in the valley, that we'd much rather work with the federal agency cooperatively, not have them in a position where they are constantly being forced to take actions that some of the employees may not even want to take, but the Congress has said, do it. So this is why this is pretty important as you go through thinking about how you want to protect other federal lands in this area of the San Luis Valley, that you always keep in the back of your mind that we've already taken care of, at least under the natural area legislation, the potential for conflict.
Thank you, Dave. So, Mr. Combs, okay. So, what are some of the possibilities, benefits, and outcomes of managing the rivers and adjacent lands in a comprehensive, planned manner? So, there's 1,000 examples. So, for example, restoration efforts along the Conejos and Rio Grande, riparian area stabilization, efficient water delivery to water users, recreation and education opportunities. We got all these from community members. Research, archaeology, protection of grazing allotments, management of the feral horses and unauthorized cattle, and development of water access for cattle away from riparian areas. That's not a small question.
Yeah. That was a big brainstorming session there, wasn't it?
It really was.
Okay, so just as a preface here, it's in me genetically. What's the difference between a puppy and a water user? Eventually, the puppy grows up and quits whining. I waited till everybody's food was put away and everything before I did that. I tell that joke on purpose, okay? When it comes to water, we're all very emotionally attached because we know what it has to do with our livelihoods, our history, our heritage, our communities. But there's an appropriate way to address it. And sometimes as water users and water rights holders, we want to treat it like it's something we should secrete away and put in a vault in the closet and lock away for a rainy day we can prove we've got water, when in reality, the water belongs to the state of Colorado and has to serve a whole lot of uses. Now, there's decreed uses, there are beneficial uses. I'm not going to trample all over water law. Don't get nervous. But when you look at how hard water can work in a system, you're making better decisions. For example, when the Kines remained an island unto themselves, it was very difficult. Platoro sits at 10,000 feet. Only a third of our watershed is above it. We don't get melt out until it's too late in the season. It's post-compact. We had so few potentials and possibilities with that reservoir. We started breaking down some walls. We started talking collaboratively. CPW showed up with a ton of water and said, if you'll help us exchange water and release it in the winter for the fish, we'll provide it. So we sat around the table with Craig and everybody else and said, how do we make this happen? And CPW gave us water. We worked with Division of Water Resources. We exchanged it into Platoro. We released that water during the winter to help the fish. And guess what? It paid compact. It didn't come out of someone's head gate. That was that many acre feet that did not come out of a head gate. It cost us nothing. BLM stepped up. They provided water. Everybody has been partners in this. So to answer this whole amalgamation of questions and comments, you're never doing the wrong thing to know who your partners are. I think you've got to be honest with what your goals are, and I think you need to also be honest with, do you really have a risk in partnering? I can't answer those questions. It's not, I think as we move forward with this NCA, it's one of those things that you're going to have to do. Like it, hate it, agree with it, disagree with it. I can show you the numbers. Everybody at this table can show you the numbers. We don't have the same water we used to have. And if we're going to continue to move forward, we've got to make more aggressive planning and cooperation so that water works harder as we move through. As addressing to the NCA, for the Kines, we pay our obligation in Las Alces. We kind of ring the bell. We can kind of wash our hands of it. As far as the state goes, though, it has to reach Lobatos. So maintaining a clear corridor is just like, think of your bathroom plumbing. You sure want that toilet to flush, don't you? You got to make sure those pipes are clean. You want efficiency, you want things to work. The rivers work the same. The better everything is working, the better every system works. I can't address the feral horses without incriminating myself, and so I don't know what to say about that. But I would just say, as the several groups move forward, understand your issues, absolutely. Represent what your needs are, but then honestly see if someone's really crashing in on your needs, or can they be complementary. Have the adult, responsible conversations of, do you really lose what you think you're losing, or are you gaining more? And that would be what I'd say on that one. Thank you.
Thank you. So I guess this one's for you, Craig. How do you see the state engineer's office working with the BLM if long-term land protection like an NCA designation were to occur and BLM lands could be managed comprehensively with the Rio Grande natural area? So again, yours kind of goes on. What are some of the benefits of managing the river and adjacent lands in coordination that could facilitate added water management tools and added data baseline for more supported decision making? And does the state engineer's office currently use the BLM AIM data? So 3-part question.
Okay.
Do you need the?
No.
Okay.
No, I
don't
don't
wanna
use
be
that. Well, thanks, everybody. I appreciate being here, and I really appreciate all the people that showed up. This is a great crowd, and this is an important topic, and so I do appreciate everybody's interest in this and coming out and learning about the water issues and at least what we think about the water issues. So in regards to this question, I'm going to start off with just what the two agencies that Anna was talking about. First, the State Engineer's Office is also the Division of Water Resources. We handle water. BLM is the Bureau of Land Management. They handle land. So there's a difference between even the names of those two agencies. And so I think that's important to keep in mind, that the Division of Water Resources administers water for the state of Colorado, and we administer water for the compact. We deliver water to the state line for compact purposes, and we deliver water to ditches and canals for the use of our water users up here. So I think that's very important. BLM does a great job too. They manage their land, and they manage the BLM's properties around the valley. And we work very closely in a lot of respects with the BLM. In fact, we're working on a couple of different things right now with the BLM. They've got a couple of court cases in water court right now that we're actively engaged in and actively working to help get those through the system and so that the BLM understands the process and can get those through the system in the most efficient manner possible. So I feel like we work well with the BLM, but I did want to just make that comment that it's two separate agencies and two separate ways that we go about doing our jobs. So in terms of the BLM assisting with water issues, I think that is definitely something that could occur, specifically in the Rio Grande Natural Area. I'll mention it since Nathan didn't want to, but the feral horses. That's definitely an issue, and the feral horses and cattle are destroying the riparian area. That in turn does have an impact on us trying to get water down to the state line. So if we have a decreased riparian area and degraded riparian area, we have a lot more evaporation occurring, and so we don't get as much water down there, so we have to send more water down to get that amount of water down to the state line that we owe. So those are important things that I think we can work with the BLM to do. There's some other areas of that we could enhance the riparian area down there too. So I think that is something that we could work with the BLM, and that they could really assist in the water issues down at that lower end. The last question was the BLM AIM data, the assessment inventory monitoring data for riparian areas. We do not use that. That again is in my mind would be used for those riparian areas and to increase the riparian areas, keep those areas from degrading. And so that would, I think, be something good that perhaps the BLM could use to enhance those riparian areas and help in that way. I don't, at the current time, I don't know that we would actually use it ourselves, but that would be something that BLM could use and help the water situation. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Mr. Robbins, you have worked in the SLV a long time and have facilitated legislative policy on both the state and federal levels. From your experience and perspective, how can managing lands in a comprehensive, planned manner through designated land protection, like the Great Sand Dunes National Park and Preserve, which you stated you were very involved with, have a benefit to future generations 20 to 30 years from now? And how does it play a role to enhance community cohesion and economic stability while protecting existing water rights? Whew.
Obviously, I feel very strongly that working cooperatively as a community and treating federal agencies as part of that community as well as state agencies is critical to the long-term stability of any basin in this state or any community in this state. It is absolutely important that federal agencies, however, be given the appropriate guidance by Congress of how they are to participate in that interaction. We are, quite frankly, blessed in the San Luis Valley that we have had federal agencies willing to cooperate with local citizens, with local water users in trying to fashion win-win situations. I want to remind you all of two things about the Rio Grande from Alamosa to the state line. One, the eastern bank of the Rio Grande is private land. It always has been. It's a land grant. There hasn't been, unless it's by purchase, any federal property on the eastern side of the river. The western side of the river has a significant amount of BLM land. Whatever Congress says, unless it is authorizing condemnation, it can't force private landowners to do or undo anything. So my current thinking is, and I'm going to tell you a little bit of historical interesting stuff. At the time we were trying to get the natural area legislation through, there was a congressman who was the chairman of one of the committees who was from Utah, and his chief of staff, and they were absolutely determined that there shouldn't be any more land withdrawals under congressional direction. And they were also absolutely determined that there should be no appropriations to fund any of those withdrawals. And so ultimately, the compromise we struck was they let the natural area legislation go through, but any reference to a budget for the BLM to carry out more advanced and further management techniques on its land within the corridor, or any budget to entice the private landowners and the county commissioners whom they were represented by to participate further in a management plan protective of the corridor, achieving the riparian stability that Craig just said was, quite frankly, important to make deliveries to the compact, and also important to the fish and wildlife, cooling the water and making the entire system work better. But there's been no money. And the BLM, the local office, to the extent it's been asked to do anything, has had to just fish into their own pocket, out of their own budget, and figure out how to do it. So whether you support a national conservation area or oppose one, something that we should be doing is talking to our congressional delegation about adding a paragraph to the natural area legislation that amends in an obligation on the part of the Secretary of the Interior to include a budget line item to fund the Bureau of Land Management's activities in managing the river through this stretch. Now that's something I hope we can all agree upon, because if that budget item includes an ability to help counties do their job as far as land planning and management, and potentially assist private landowners in doing things like fencing off the riparian area or digging wells set back from the river so you can put in stock tanks that don't force whether the stray cattle or the cattle that are lawfully there from having to go down to the bank of the river in order to get a drink. And so there are lots of things we can do, whether or not, or however you all end up coming to rest on a national conservation area. But I again want to say, it's really important that we not sacrifice the directions and conclusions that Congress made about this reach of the Rio Grande, because it will impact each of the water user communities in this valley, including the water user communities along the Caneos. Now, I will take off the pom-poms on my shoes and calm down.
Thank you, Dave. Maybe. Mr. Combs, looking ahead 20 to 30 years from your local water management perspective, how might managing these lands and water in a comprehensive planned manner contribute to the economic stability of local communities and businesses, and what could be some of the possible outcomes?
So, I mean, most of us that have water rights or water users, it's a business, whether it's ranching or production farming or what we do. The most difficult thing we have is the unknown, right? The variability. And so when you start looking at long-term planning, I think you have to look at what do you want in 20 or 30 years. Typically, when you have a known set of rules, a known set of standards that are going to be expected for the future, you make better decisions economically for your own community, for your own businesses. In water, I think it's the same thing in this. I think David said it perfect. Support the NCA, don't support the NCA. It's not our job to lobby one way or the other, just kind of talk about some of the impacts. For us in the water world, the more people that agree on how something should be done, the harder it is to overturn it. And so, for example, in the compact, there's very, very few people that realistically want to change the compact, right? It's too important to all of us, and none of us think we'll do better than we've got now. And so it becomes a very difficult, and it becomes foundational to how we manage. And I would say, as we go forward with water for the communities, how we look at this, look forward and see, is this going to help us have more stability? Is it going to give us more security in that 20 to 30 years? Or does it not really provide anything different? For us, we're a small community, but I don't think any of you haven't seen people moving in around you. I think kind of the cover's coming off this little treasure here, and we're getting more and more people that have different ideas, that don't have the history, that don't have the same beliefs. And so how then do we strengthen our positions for the long term, for 20 to 30 years? I don't know. I don't want to throw anybody under the bus, because your federal government employees, you can have different changes there in personnel. You can have changes in the state agencies. You can have state changes in the personnel of the local agencies. But I think to be responsible, you have to look at what's your best bet for stability of the future. And does this or does it not contribute to that? For the Kness Conservancy, our issue is right along exactly what the discussion has been. We want to make sure that nothing interferes with the state of Colorado, and specifically the Rio Grande and the Caneos from managing how they deliver their compact obligations. We do not believe that other agencies coming in would be security and would be good for us in the 20 to 30-year future. So for us, that's our view, is how do we keep management localized and stable? So, yeah.
Thank you. All right. Bravo. So this is for Craig? Okay. So how do you see the future of water management adapting 20 to 30 years, especially as it relates to drought study modeling and anticipated reduction of flow, earlier snowmelt, and less recharge? What sort of tools will the state engineer's office employ in order to adapt to the changing conditions?
Well, thank you. I really like this question because I think it really highlights some of the things that we're doing right now and some of the things that we're planning for in the future. And so I'll talk about those. The most important thing in my mind is the Rio Grande Compact and just how it was developed and how it actually accounts for drought times and flooding times, and it's different than a lot of the compacts that we have in the state of Colorado. Colorado River compact, for instance, doesn't have any allowance for if it's a dry year or a wet year, but the Rio Grande compact does. And so as you've seen on some of these graphs that Pat was showing, if it's a dry year, we get to keep more higher percentage here in the Rio Grande Basin in Colorado and use that water. If it's a large year, we have to deliver a larger percentage of that down to the state line for the use in the downstream states. And we can't use as much up here. So that is a really key component of all of this, I think, is that since 1938, we've had this in place, and we have that situation that we can actually adjust year to year based on whether it's a drought or a high year. And as we're heading into more and more drought years, it seems like that compact still protects us, and it still allows Colorado to use the water and utilize the water up here that we need it up here. So I think that's really one of the big keys of this. The other thing is, for the last 20, 25 years or so, we've been putting into place some things that really help us, I think, into the future. And by we, I mean the state of Colorado, the Division of Water Resources, but also the water users and the water user groups and the conservancy and conservation districts. For instance, in 1999, we started the Rio Grande Decision Support System, which is a computer model that helps us to model the groundwater. And so because you can't see the groundwater that's 200 feet below you and you don't know exactly what's going on, that groundwater model really helps us to know how the interaction is occurring between if you pump a well, how much water you're going to get out, what's the impact of that water coming out going to be on the stream systems. A lot of times the stream systems it'll have a negative impact on those stream systems, and it'll actually cause the water to go out of the stream systems back into the ground to fill up that hole. But kind of interestingly, there's some areas and some stream systems that pumping actually helps the stream system. You can have the return flow from those groundwater wells going into the streams and actually increasing the flow in the stream. So that's kind of a unique thing that we have here and something to really think about. And the Rio Grande Decision Support System model shows us all of that, and it's a huge model. We've got a guy that has 2 or 3 or 4 PhDs, I don't know, running the thing, and really a neat thing. And we can use that into the future and know what the impact of drought situations are going to be on our aquifer system, on our stream flows, those sorts of things. One other thing that is being put in and has been put in over the last 20 years or so are rules and regulations, specifically for groundwater. But these rules and regulations help us to regulate the groundwater usage going forward. And I think as most of you know, we do have some areas of the valley that are in a bad way with the aquifer systems. The aquifers are dropping. And so here again, the model helps us to know how much the dropping of the aquifer is occurring, what it's going to be into the future. And we've got those rules and regulations in place so that 20 to 40 years from now, those rules and regulations will still be in place, and hopefully for like the aquifers, we'll build up that aquifer, and in 20 to 40 years, our aquifers will actually be in a better shape than they are now, and our entire water system will be in a better shape, even if we do have more drought conditions. And so that, I think, in answer to this question, really, we've got those in place, and those ways that we can solve some of these issues. We've already got them in place. It'll just be utilizing them going into the future.
Thank you, Craig. Okay, last question of the evening. So it's for either Pat or Craig. Do you want me to? Pat? Okay. The topic of water infrastructure has come up, such as stock tanks being placed in specific areas, not just in the Rio Grande natural area, but in certain places on BLM lands that are facilitating permittees. Could the state engineer's office facilitate this process in coordination with the BLM to support the needs of the permittee, but also to mitigate or prevent damage to riparian areas?
Great question. If we get there, we're going to need more water. You keep the cows and keep the horses off the river. What do you do to provide water for those animals? The state engineer's office is solely responsible for issuing well permits in the state of Colorado, and we have stock wells, and they're allowed to pump 15 gallons a minute. I know that technology for solar pumps has developed over the last several years, so solar pumps now work better than they used to. We have the opportunity for live LWST, livestock watering tanks, where you can put a dam on a creek, and a creek that would normally be dry 80% of the time, you can put a livestock water control device out there. Erosion control is another type, where you can put that structure out there and it'll retain water and draw the animals to that, so they stay out of the riparian area. But we actively issue well permits on a daily basis, and so it's really easy to come in, dedicate 35 or 40 acres to a brand new stock well, and we'll be glad to work with you.
Thank you. All right, so, go ahead.
Well, what's the issue? It's been the issue since the natural area law was enacted. Okay, hi YouTube. I'm of the age where I don't recognize that sort of technology, so pardon me. And I'm quite used to shouting at large audiences. Now, what's been the problem since we started on the natural area? Money. And that's what we need to solve. At the time the law was passed, we had some assurances from a bygone administration that they would find ways to direct funding through the BLM to install the sort of wells that Pat talked about, and steel tanks or earthen tanks in order to move the stock back off the river. We've never seen a dollar of it. We don't have yet in place a way to figure out how to get some of that money to the private allottees or the landowners. And so that is something that we all need to get together and focus on, because whether we continue the NCA conversation for the next week, month, year, whatever, we need to be talking with our delegation about helping us add to the natural area bill to provide for a funding source not just for the BLM, but also so money can be allocated under one or more of the federal programs to the local stock owners and users so that we can actually expect them then to keep their stock off the riverbanks in furtherance of what Craig talked about. Thank you. I have a lot more to say, but they're not going to let me, so.
Thank you. So we are going to move to the Q&A portion of the evening. So, okay, Elliot, you're first.
Well, I could say yesterday was tax day, and I just know that all of us paid our taxes, and I'm sitting over here, not over there on the panel, so I could take a position, and I'm going to take a win-win position. And I think what we've heard today is that if we really listen through the lines, in our area, in the Rio Grande area right now, in our basin, we're over appropriated. So we can't mess with our water at all. We need every drop that we can have. And that's what we go to these meetings several times a week and involved in these boards to protect that so we can protect our own livelihoods. Okay, so this is the other deal. Since we pay the taxes, like I mentioned earlier, I think this can be a win-win situation. And so, for example, I've been involved. I'm a permittee. I graze cattle and all that kind of stuff. And this is the one thing that I really see that it would be a win-win situation, is that if we can develop an NCA, but where our water remains unchanged, and just like our attorney said, it's unaltered, it's unchanged, and I think we can work together to enhance what we have. And so the way I see it is that if we protect our water and we protect our grazing under an NCA, then everybody wins out. We can protect those riparian areas, and I protected riparian areas. I own land off a river, off the San Antonio River. I put 3.1 miles of fencing in there, and I couldn't have done it on my own. But I got in RCS help, and I got it done. And that's been great. I have a great riparian area. I have good grazing now there, the whole bit. So it's a win. We can win that way. And then we can have this NCA where we can bring some federal money to help protect those riparian areas, and it'll help deliver our water and protect that Rio Grande corridor. So my take is really a win-win situation, and it sees both sides. It's not one side's winning or getting over the other one. And so we got to really be open, like we heard our people say up here, our panel, is that we have to work together. And it's all about studying the facts and doing what makes sense. That's my take.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Tyler Huffaker, I'm a local rancher here in the valley. I wrote down my questions just so I could keep my train of thought and make sure it was clear to everyone. One thing I would really like to point out is our heritage. My family's been out on that land since the early 1900s on the allotment that I have, and I love that allotment, and it looks great out there. Are there some things we need to improve? Yes. We talked about feral animals that are out there. They're, taking that on, and that's a whole nother issue. So I guess my first question is, if this conservation area designation is unanimously unwanted, then why is it being pushed in the community? Anybody that can give me an answer. And I have some more questions, by the way.
Okay. Do you want to finish asking your questions? Do you have any directly to the panel? I'm not going to keep the mic in any form, so if you want to, whatever you want to do, Mr. Huffaker, is fine. Okay, yeah, that sounds good.
I don't know if, listening to the community, if everyone is aware that in places and areas we're being over-regulated. And I'm not going to mention any names or any agencies or anything, but the common people of Conejos County are getting tired of just all the regulation that's going on. And you can see what it means to me. Nathan said there, don't let the emotion get into it, but it is an emotional topic, you know. Are we aware that the ranching, recreation, and general hunting communities oppose it? I just would ask that. Are we aware, is everyone aware that there is a formal petition that's going against the designation? And it's gaining momentum every day. And then I would like to understand from the San Luis Valley Ecosystems Council, why was the town of Romeo misquoted, and why was one of our county commissioners misquoted in some of the statements that were made. And then finally, if this designation is stopped, can there be a moratorium on pushing these types of designations every few years? Because we were just here, I don't remember the exact year, I'm getting too old for that, but we were just here a few years ago in the same situation, talking about the same thing. And so those are some questions I have for the evening, but I'll turn the mic over to whoever's designated.
Hey, everybody. My name is Josh Lowenstein. I'm the one who started this petition. Right now, as it stands, we are almost at 290 signatures, many of which are some of the, we have 2 out of 3 of the Conejos County Commissioners signed on board. We have Senator Cleve Simpson on board. That is in direct opposition of doing a national conservation area. And the question I have is for these, now that we're talking about water at this particular meeting, I have a great respect for you water guys. You're all awesome. You got a heck of a hard job, and I appreciate it. But what I'm trying to figure out is why do we have to have such a gigantic area of land that is, you know, not really even part of the water concerns that we're talking about here, that has to be part of this conservation area? And 2, as the lawyer there on the end said, that we need to get direction from Congress? Really? Congress giving you guys direction, you know, that's pretty laughable. But what exactly is going on the river, besides, of course, the cattle and the feral horses, that's a need in the water realm for a conservation area? Thank you.
Quickly, in response to that question, what there is a need for is some specific direction from Congress to the Secretary of the Interior to fund the BLM's operation of the river. I mean, what's really holding up all of these desired outcomes, even with just the natural area, not talking about the NCA, is a way to fund the drilling of stock wells, the installation of stock tanks, and the steps that need to be taken in order to restore the riparian zone along the river. That's really the goal that, at least from my perspective, would be helpful.
I'd like to respond to kind of somewhat to some of the topics here. That so I want to say that I'm kind of like, I think most of us up here, not necessarily for or against the NCA, just here to give you information. And quite honestly, probably everybody in this room knows as much or a lot more about the NCA than I do, and the pros and cons of it. I was on the Rio Grande Natural Area Commission, so I know a fair amount about the Rio Grande Natural Area, but the NCA, not so much. But I do want to say that as far as water issues goes, I really do agree with David that whether the NCA is good for most people or not, I can see the one part of it that is, in my opinion, not going to be good if it does happen, and that's if there is a water component to that. I think if there is a water component in the NCA, it will cause some big problems in my mind, and we'll have some issues between the water users upstream and the NCA water right downstream.
If it's okay, I was just going to also say, Josh, I think maybe we weren't clear on that. None of us are pro or against. We're just here representing the water issues. But your concern about why we're worried about that land that doesn't have anything to do with water, I think, is a little bit in error. Those of us in the water world, we have to constantly live in a state of preparation, but not paranoia, and that's a fine line, right? And I'll give you an example. Is we just got back from D.C., where the Rio Grande Compact was being argued in front of the federal Supreme Court, because the federal government wanted to have input. They're not signatories to the compact, but they had interests that have just recently arisen, so to speak. And so I think our point of being here about, like what Craig is saying, we just want to be here to say it's not unrelated, right? We're just trying to say that whatever the public decides to do with the NCA, yes or no, our job is to ensure that there isn't an overreach, there isn't an accidental omission of authorities or anything's given or taken, so that our water can be protected. I think that's the role of our panel, is just to say these are potential impacts to the way we administer water now. And so when you get an entity, if you had an entity that wanted to form an NCA or a national monument, and then they say, we need water to have a better monument, what's our protection? That's our job, is to just say, these are the things we believe we need to protect. The administration of the compact, how we've administered with the language of the natural area, those types of things. Not that they're not related. And like I said, we want to be prepared, but not paranoid. So,
you guys, is where is the last water diversion point on the Rio Grande? Where is it considered New Mexico or Texas? And where do they check that? Where's that checkpoint at?
I will then be corrected by the division engineer, but the water becomes water delivered to New Mexico under the compact at the Labados gauge. And below the Labados gauge, the gauge is right at the commencement of the Big Canyon. So from there on, there are no diversions. And I believe the last diversion is up in the vicinity of the Alamosa National Wildlife Refuge.
Yeah, some ditches that never get water.
It was decreed, called Tres Rios, but the conditions that were placed upon the exercise of that water right by the water court were such that it is effectively non-existent, because it is only entitled to divert water if and when Elephant Butte Reservoir is full and spilling. and may only divert as long as the spill continues. Thereafter, it's out of priority again. And the reason for that is, of course, because senior water rights on the Conejos and the Rio Grande were curtailed in order to produce Colorado's entitlement under the compact, and a junior water right should not be able to come in and divert at any time. 100% of all of the existing water rights are in full priority.
I have a microphone over here. We'll see if it catches it. I guess one of my questions is, let's say hypothetically this goes through, and this is more, I guess, for you, David. What is in place to kind of control that water language, or is that truly at the hands of Congress as they're drafting it to determine whether those rights are reserved or not?
Were the congressional delegation to agree to introduce legislation to create a natural area, what is contained in that legislation will be up to the senator or senators and the congresswoman to make a decision on what the language says. And of course, I hope you will all join me in encouraging them to fully incorporate the current language in the natural area at a minimum. Thank you.
Thank you.
I was curious, where are we at in the stage now with this? So what's the next step to move forward towards the NCA? And where is it at in the process? And is this a ballot initiative? Is this a House of Representative carrying it, a bill, a senator carrying a bill? What is how does this happen?
So as I stated in the beginning, there's no proposal. This is just community dialogue, talking about engaging the feelings of the community. So like Tyler stated, there is opposition, there is support, as with any initiative, but it is not a proposal. So far, it's just potential. We've been having community meetings to talk about, like I said, putting together a panel of experts to address the questions and concerns of the community. So right now, there's no bill. There's no bill. Yes.
Did anyone else have any questions? Okay.
I'm a permittee holder, probably the last on the list of Colorado. My question is, obviously the problem is show me the money. They don't want us on the corridor of the river to water our cattle. We need to drill wells up on, get them away. The corridor, as far as I know, there's no diversion points from LaSalle to Sason that I know of. So, the corridor of the river's beaten up. Bad. I know it's not a water situation. Who patrols that? The BLM. They don't have the people to control that. We're looking at this situation, and we're talking about the BLM managing it. I've been to several meetings with the BLM. They tell me that they're 30% short on people to manage what they got. So maybe this is a question for the BLM. If this goes into place, they're going to have some money. Where's that going to come from?
It has, from my perspective, the initial understandings behind the creation of the natural area were that the funding would be provided through the BLM by the Congress. I mean, there is a section in the natural area bill that says that there can be made appropriations, but there is no mandate that they actually be made, or that the Bureau of Land Management assign a certain number of personnel or a certain amount of money to the necessary activities that I think we all agree with you occur along the corridor. And so, as I mentioned earlier, I think we certainly can have a good conversation with our congressional delegation, the senators and the congresswomen, to see about making maybe a mandatory language to the existing bill, to the existing law, that make it more clear that their expectations concerning that funding. Here you go. You can't speak. YouTube.
Oh. Yes. Why can it not stay the way it is? If it's kind of working, is there a way that the people along the river can get money to get help to do wells to keep the cattle off? Why do we need an NCA?
I said earlier, I'm not here to argue for or against the NCA. My personal view is that there is, as far as managing the river corridor itself, and a quarter mile on either side, the natural area legislation does that. We may have to talk about a little funding incentive there, but it does that. That it does not, and we all have to accept the fact that it does not affect any of the other federal land within Conneaut County. And so I'm not sure the NCA is a necessary decision for Congress to make based upon protection of the river corridor. It should be based upon the protection of the land that isn't already withdrawn and protected, and your discussion should focus on that. I read you the portions of the existing natural area that provide the authority to do all of the things that the BLM could and would do if an NCA was created, except it is limited to a quarter mile on either side of the the middle of the river. Okay?
I just wanted to build on a couple things that have come up. I'm Erin Minks. I'm with U.S. Senator Michael Bennett's office. I live in Alamosa. I've been working on this discussion off and on for probably over 10 years to some degree with a lot of you in the room. So it's good to see a lot of familiar faces. This feels like a familiar discussion that your community keeps having with itself. And the conversation around the needs along the river is a common thread around the impacts on the river. And I think I'm here on behalf of Senator Bennett to just, honestly, Carol, you asked what happens next? Whatever the community wants, if the community can agree. If the community doesn't agree, I can tell you Senator Bennett's not going to introduce anything if the community doesn't agree. I can speak for Michael. That's why I'm here. But I think we are also in a place where tonight's conversation is focused on water. I've been going to all the meetings for the last 6 months, and there's been recreation, there have been heritage conversations. It's about more than water down there. So again, I just wanted to make sure you knew I'm here, I'm in the Valley, I'm in Alamosa, I work ideally with all of you, but I think the conversation around funding is something that Congress, if it functions enough to pass a budget, which you all know is not always the case, a conversation around funding the natural area can start now. Could have started 6 months ago. Could have started years ago. And I think that's a conversation we'd be thrilled to have in a strategic way, especially if it could be bipartisan. And I think that would be something we'd be happy to work on. So that's just to feel out the audience tonight. I would just make sure you guys know we're all here. We've got staff here. We've got Kathy here from Rep. Obert's office. We have Azrael here from Hickenlooper's office. We are here because our bosses are listening to this process, and that's what we're here for. So,
Thank you. Do you want to close this out, Chris?
So did anybody else have any questions or anything they wanted to ask? It's a little after 8 o'clock, but if people wanted to. Okay. Thank you. It's Lee.
all yours, Mr. Sowards.
So looking at some of this, I'm not as skeptical about the designation as I am the group promoting it. It says right here in this, promoting wolves in this 3030 resolution, that's not at all what our local people stand for.
Anything in there is just for educational purposes. Please note.
I think Ann is going to get her 10,000 steps in tonight. Anyway, I'm Chris Canale, Director of the San Luis Valley Ecosystem Council. And Tyler, you had brought us up. I was actually hoping I could just listen tonight. But I feel compelled to probably close us out because you had said some things that I wanted to clarify from our perspective, which is there are people that are supportive of a national conservation area here in Conejos County, and there are people that are against. And that was made abundantly clear when in 2015, there were resolutions passed, and it was specifically along the 285 corridor because businesses there are looking for opportunities. And so I noticed you have a hat over there that says land grab, which, you know, it was pretty interesting to see that. And, you know, I mean, it's kind of a, not the best way of putting it, but this is a land grab for Conejos County. It's an opportunity for Conejos County to actually plan for future generations and develop cultural and historic opportunities on BLM lands that don't exist now, and for the young people that are here now to be able to have other opportunities on BLM lands. And it's happening. I mean, it's happening in other parts of Colorado. It's happening in New Mexico. I mean, there are many opportunities that are growing because the communities there decided that they wanted to have more opportunities for the next generation. And they wanted to develop education opportunities and recreation opportunities, and this all requires planning. But I can tell you that there isn't an NCA that's in place now that doesn't regret doing it, including the grazing community. Because they all got together and went, you know what? We could actually benefit more from the BLM lands than we are currently doing today. And you know what? They are. And it's businesses, small businesses that are thriving. It's young people getting out on the landscape and learning about the archaeological history that's there. I mean, I could go on and on and on, and I need to close it out now. But the reality is, Conejos County has this golden opportunity to connect with the BLM lands that are currently here in a more meaningful way. And that's up to you. But thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it. Is through the Development Resources Group here in the San Luis Valley. Yeah, absolutely.
So my wife and I own a small business down the highway, and over the past 3-4 years, we've incurred a lot of trials and troubles, and no backing for all the taxpayer money that we put forth. For the statement to be on here that these small businesses are locked up and boarded up, and this thing is going to provide a thriving opportunity for all these small businesses. we would first have to conquer a DA that doesn't protect us, right? Because that's occurring right now. We would also have to accomplish something in the realm of the judicial system where people that steal from our business is let out on a $250 bond, and they're going out and they're stealing cattle and semi-trailers and everything else. So you couple that with there's not even enough water going down that Rio Grande for rafting and the recreational aspect of it. I'm trying to believe in this. The board presented a lot of good benefits, but when you don't have enough water going down the river to raft, it's encompassed by so much private land, and you got cops that are arresting people up into the 500s, and they're let out on a $1 bond. Your small business ain't going to thrive because they're not being protected. So you got thousands of dollars of product being stolen, like from us, our fences being cut, product being stolen, cops arresting them, and then we're told as a small business that it takes money to bring that person out of jail from New Mexico up here to serve his 5 warrants. Well, I thought that's why we pay taxes. So for this, you know, the NCA to come in and just take the plywood off our doors, I don't see it. And that's why I asked if there was a study done of why these small businesses are suffering and how this is going to benefit it. And I read your literature, and I don't see it.
Well, the study isn't in there, but yes, there's a lot of, thank you. There's a lot of baseline data around what happens to communities after an NCA is designated, and it's well documented. But I just want you to know that I've actually rafted between the Lobatos Bridge and the Taos Box, and it was an amazing experience, I gotta say. So, anyway, it is possible at certain times of the year. Thank you, everybody, for coming.